And good day, I'm Tom Costello at NBC News headquarters. We are coming on the air with that historic, monumental breaking news. Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States and potentially the next president, guilty across the board, convicted of 34 felonies in his New York criminal trial. On charges that he lied on business records to cover up hush money payments to a former adult film star who claims the two had an affair. Mr. Trump has always denied that. Prosecutors say it was to hide an underlying crime. That crime was related to interference in the 2016 election. The former president, in just the last hour, maintaining his innocence, saying it is up to the voters to decide on November 5th. His sentencing, though, now on July 11th, and that is just 4 days before the Republican National Convention. We are seeing protesters right now in Manhattan, about a block from the courthouse, and we're also seeing a lot of banners saying that Trump is guilty. More of those types of banners, not a lot of pro-Trump protesters in Manhattan, perhaps not a surprise. We're also expecting to see Manhattan DA Attorney Alvin Bragg about 30 minutes from now when he's out with his reaction to the verdict. We want to bring you that live. In the meantime, we have an awful lot happening now. A huge team outside court and here in the studio. Legal analysts, political pros, all of them here to break it down. Rahima Ellis, Yasmin Vasugian, and Lisa Rubin. Let's begin there, outside the court. And Lisa, you were inside the courtroom today. Talk us through what you saw, what happened. Were the jurors making eye contact with President Trump? Did he have eye contact? Walk us through what we didn't see.
What you didn't see was that the judge asked Tom, both sides to come in at 4:15 and told them that he was going to dismiss the jurors at 4:30. And then he said he had to step off the bench and he would be back momentarily. When he came back, well after 4:30, I should add, at about 4:36, 4:38, he said that he had been given a note by the jurors at 4:20 that they had a verdict, but that they needed a little bit more time to complete the forms necessary to reduce their verdict to an official verdict, so to speak. And so when they came back in at 5 o'clock, the foreperson was asked, do you have a verdict? He stood up with a hand mic in his hand, and he was asked by the courtroom deputy, what say you is your verdict on count 1? And they asked him count 1 through 34, and in a clear and strong voice, not looking toward either of the parties, but only directed toward Judge Merchan, he said guilty to each and every one of the 34 counts. And then what usually happened here. The defense was asked if they wanted to take a poll. That means asking each individual juror if they share in the jury's verdict to make sure that it is, in fact, unanimous. And 1 through 12, each one of them affirmed that that was their verdict. At that point, we were done reading the verdict. I will tell you, you could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. The only noise was all the clackety-clacks of 100-plus reporters trying to take down what was happening around them. When we realized that the first count was guilty, I could hear people on both sides of me sort of like breathe in and gasp at the same time. People really did not appreciate that we were going to see 34 counts, particularly since there were moments where, in looking at these jurors, they were skeptical of certain witnesses. They didn't have the kinds of faces that indicated they were necessarily pro-prosecution. They really played it straight. And they were careful. They asked a number of questions during their deliberations, including asking for readbacks of certain jury instructions and 4 different areas of testimony. And so to see a unanimous verdict on all 34 counts, shocking to those in the courtroom, most of all, Donald Trump, who walked out with his jaw set and determined but grim, almost as if he knew this day was going to come and yet was still unprepared for the gravity of having been the first former or current U.S. president convicted of any crime, let alone 34 of them.
But, Lisa, did he appear resigned to this, just convicted across all counts, or did he go on truly thinking that he was going to beat some or all of these charges, just by body language, I'm wondering?
By body language, he seemed in very good spirits when he was summoned at 4:15. He and Todd Blanche, his lead lawyer, sitting shoulder to shoulder, conferring, whispering to each other as if they were sharing some extended private inside joke. They were as jovial as two people facing jury deliberations could be. And yet that all dissipated when they found out that they had a verdict. When they learned that they had a verdict, they didn't scoot away from each other necessarily, but you could feel even their bodies moving toward each other. President Trump staring dead ahead, Todd Blanche looking ahead too. And the conviviality of the earlier moment, Tom, was gone in that.
Let's go to my colleague, Rahema Ellis, who is outside the courthouse as well. And Rahema, what are you seeing from folks there? I understand not a lot of pro-Trump demonstrators, but also we know that the president did also have a few comments, right?
We do know that the president has some comments, Tom. We're going to widen out a little bit, Kevin, my cameraman, and look at this area. Earlier in the day, Tom, this was crowded with pro-Trump supporters, I should say. But that's not the case now. What we see here, we're going to pan over a little bit. Police officers have come out in large number. They've been out here in large numbers anyway. But we're almost seeing as many police officers as we are seeing spectators. At this moment, there are more people who are in favor of the verdict that came down this afternoon. One person said to me, "I'm glad it's finally over." Another person said it's the right verdict. Meanwhile, a Trump supporter said to me he was stunned, shocked, and surprised, and he will still vote for Trump, no matter what this verdict that came down today. But there was a hush, I have to tell you, when the word came down that the jurors had reached a verdict and it would be read in about 30 minutes. All of the shouting of pro-Trump that had been going on, a quiet fell over this park just across the street from the courthouse as people waited with anticipation of what that verdict was be. And then when they heard one count after another, all the way to 34, that it was guilty, it got even quieter than before. And those who were Trump supporters quietly made their way out after they made a ruckus. And then you saw more of Trump supporters. And I have to tell you, Tom, what we also saw was people who came here just to get a look to see what it was like, what it would feel like to be here. There's a little bit of a carnival atmosphere as well. One man came here a little while ago wearing an orange jumpsuit and a Trump mask on and with his thumb raised. Another person is saying Trump should go to jail. We know there's probably not going to be any jail time for the former president. But the point I'm trying to make to you, if we can pan over here a little bit, again, I want you to see the number of police officers who were here in the crowd. Many, many officers out here, Tom, and not nearly as many protesters for whom they would be protecting this area against. It is quiet here. There is a shock here. People are trying to absorb and to take in what's happened.
Sounds like on both sides of, on both
Many
sides
people,
of the political spectrum, there's shock, right, Rahema?
Wanted this verdict, others who were dreading this verdict, and all of them, I think, who were stunned by this verdict.
Yep. My apologies. Didn't mean to walk on you. Thank you. Let's talk to Yasmin very quickly. I understand that we're hearing from Michael Cohen, the former president's fixer, former lawyer. What is he saying?
Yeah, Michael Cohen actually sent out a tweet, Tom. Let me read it for you because I actually posted it as well on my Twitter. I'm sending out a statement saying today is an important day for accountability and the rule of law. While it has been a difficult journey for me and my family, the truth always matters. I want to thank my attorneys, Danya Perry and Joshua Kolb, for their invaluable guidance and support throughout this time. Also, by the way, Michael Cohen, I believe, is appearing on MSNBC at 8 p.m. This evening. I think it's kind of important to put this all in perspective, Tom, as we think about this. And I think shock is really a good word to be used both by Rahema and by Lisa here, who, by the way, is standing on a box. She's not taller than me in real life. Just to let everybody know out there that's watching. But when you think about when you think about Michael Cohen's testimony and how he was kind of seen as the star witness here, right? He bookended this trial with David Pecker at the very beginning. And there were only 4 questions asked by this jury who deliberated for, I believe it was 9.5 hours or so. And those questions pertained both to Michael Cohen's testimony and to David Pecker's testimony. And it seemed as if it came down to their credibility, really, with their own testimony. And it's interesting and important to think about that as we think about this in the grand scheme of things. And really the last year and a half that Donald Trump has experienced, right? Not only has he been found guilty on 34 counts in the courtroom behind behind me. He owes over $500 million between E.G. Carroll and the Trump civil fraud trial as well. So really an uphill battle for the presumptive Republican nominee for president as we make our way to November, Tom.
Ladies, thank you. Great analysis. And we're also, by the way, waiting for the Manhattan DA. We expect now at 6:45 Eastern Time. We'll bring you that live. Let's bring in our team of lawyers here to break this all down. Former Trump lawyer Michael Vanderveen is here. NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden is here. Georgetown law professor Michelle Goodwin and former Maryland DA attorney Debbie Hines is here. Michael, you know the president personally, and I'm just curious. What was the conversation in the SUV today with his lawyers going back to Trump Tower? Understanding that he's defiant, understanding he said that he's going to appeal, is it in their interest to also drag out the appeals process? What are they talking about?
Well, first they're talking about the jury and the way they felt that the jury was unfair. They were talking about the evidence that they came in and didn't think should have come in. They were talking about Michael Cohen and what a rat he is. They were probably talking about the appeals, but probably more importantly, they were talking about the political future. How this impacts from now until November and how they're going to handle it and what they think will come as a result of that.
Their public face on that is that he's a political victim here, but those are the public comments. Privately, do they think, oh boy, maybe this isn't so good for us?
No, you know, I can't disclose any attorney-client privilege, but, you know, the gentleman believes he's invincible. You know, he thinks that he's going to be able to overcome any obstacle that there is, and that's his mindset. His mindset is, I'm going to win, and that I'm sure that mindset is in any way jogged by this verdict. And you know, Lady Justice, she's blind, whether it's a president of the United States or whether it's an electrician, you know, down the road.
Kristen, take us through now what happens next, because the sentencing is set for July 11th. That's only 4 days before the GOP convention. So that would feed into the narrative that the Trump team has that this is a political motivated hit job.
It'll absolutely fit into the narrative. But keep in mind, this is the date that actually both the prosecutor and the defense attorneys asked for. The defense attorneys asked for mid-June. And so this
it could work to the Trump team's advantage as well to portray him as a victim.
It absolutely could, particularly if he gets jail time, right? Which I don't think is a likely scenario. Look, he's been convicted of 34 counts. Each carries up to 4 years in jail. But let's really take it down. He's a first-time offender. This is a Class E felony, and though it's a felony, Tom, it is very low level. It is not seen as serious, right?
Let's underscore, these are state charges, not federal.
And that's right.
He remains on bond, and therefore he can go back to Florida if he wants to, right?
He absolutely could, unless there's some type of amendment in his bail conditions, which it doesn't look like there will be. So he absolutely could go back to Florida. He can go anywhere, and he can still campaign. But I think, bottom line is it's absolutely going to fit into any narrative that he has. Right?
I'm told that we right now have just received the signed verdict sheets that are into us here at NBC News, and there they are. Those are the official signed verdict sheets. And talk us through the process here. Obviously, the judge has to sign those sheets, right?
Yes. The judge actually already polled the jury, making sure that every juror came up with this verdict unanimously. And then the judge signs it, and that makes it official. That makes it very clear that this conviction was based on the jury trial proceedings where Trump was the defendant. And it was the actual jurors who came up to that verdict.
Right. Can we quickly go to Debbie? And Debbie here, let's talk through this guilty verdict here. How is this going to play out with the former president to appeal? He hasn't announced formally, but we do know that this is the plan.
Exactly. And he has the right, like any defendant in America, has the right to appeal. But you just don't appeal saying, I don't like this verdict. You have to have a legal basis in order to be successful. You have to have a legal basis on which to appeal. There may be some issues that can be appealed on, but you just don't come up and say, I'm unhappy with this appeal. Yeah. This is a bogus process, because it was not. It was justice that was done in this case. So whatever the time period after he is actually sentenced on July 11th, he'll have whatever period of time in New York that he can actually file, he and his attorneys can file for an appeal in the state of New York.
Debbie and Michelle, real quickly, we want to hear what the president said, former president said, as he left court.
The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people.
Okay, essentially saying that the real verdict comes on Election Day, something that former President Biden's team has said as well as today. And to be clear, Donald Trump can still run for president, right, Debbie? This doesn't change any of that.
No, he can still run. Yes, he can still run for president. He's over the age of 35. He's a U.S. citizen, and those are the only requirements that I know of under the Constitution. So, yes, he can still run for president. But there is a political process and there is a judicial process. And today we saw that the criminal justice process works in America against the former president of the United States, just like it works in America each and every day against black and brown people that are charged.
Right. Again, we're still waiting here on Alvin Bragg just momentarily. Can I just ask Michael, what would your advice be to the former president about don't make the situation worse? Hold on a second. We do have the DA Bragg who's about to speak. Let's listen in.
Good evening. First and foremost, I want to thank the jury for its service. Jurors perform a fundamental civic duty. Their service is literally the cornerstone of our judicial system. We should all be thankful for the careful attention that this jury paid to the evidence and the law and their time and commitment over these past several weeks. 12 everyday New Yorkers, and of course our alternates, heard testimony from 22 witnesses, including former and current employees of the defendant, media executives, book publishers, custodians of records, and others. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and emails. They heard recordings. They saw checks and invoices, bank statements, and calendar appointments. This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. A major part of our practice during that nearly 90 years has been public integrity work, including cases involving jurists, local and state electeds, public servants, and others. I want to thank this phenomenal prosecution team, embodying the finest traditions of this office: professionalism, integrity, dedication, and service. They are model public servants, and I am proud and humbled to serve side by side with them. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor. I want to conclude by expressing deep gratitude to the NYPD and the officers of the Office of Court Administration for securing the courthouse, all of our safety, making sure the courthouse and all of the other matters that are important in their own right continued seamlessly. They will continue to be and have always been incredible partners. Thank you.
And do you plan to request a prison sentence? Donald Trump's multiple violations of the gag order that was in place should factor into that request at all?
The judge scheduled a sentencing for July 11th. We will speak in court in that time. He also set a motion schedule. We will speak in our court filings as we've done throughout this proceeding.
Donald Trump has repeatedly targeted you personally and members of your prosecution team. Do you have a response to the former president after this trial is concluded?
I do not.
Alvin, in February, you decided not to bring a case against Donald Trump. You criticized them. You criticized when you vetted him in March 2023. You criticized when people really started to understand that case. How do you think of all that now, seeing the results of that, and you kind of put that in context with your personal history?
I did my job. Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. And that's exactly what we did here. And what I feel is just gratitude to work alongside phenomenal public servants who do that each and every day in matters that you all write about and make the press, and in lots of matters that you don't. I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
Last, Mr. Steinglass, many people said the prosecution was masterful and flawless. Just want to know how you feel at this moment. Sorry.
I'll let you back. How do you feel? Mr. Steinglass, I think some of you probably saw him speak for a little bit the other day. So he's done his job, as has this team. And he just told me, tell him how I feel. I think you said that. I will just say just enormous gratitude. You know, our system, I talked about the jurors at the beginning of my remarks. We have a phenomenal system. 12 everyday New Yorkers. They listen to the judge's directions. They follow the evidence. You saw them in court every day. They were careful and attentive. And so I feel deep gratitude to work alongside them, to be a part of this system. And I just want to echo that this is what we're doing every single day. I mean, during this trial, just this week, right, a ghost gun indictment, Grimaldi's wage theft plea resolution, sex crimes, convictions, all sorts of work that's being done by phenomenal public servants. So we're before you today on this obviously consequential matter, but this is what we do every day. We follow the facts and the law without fear or favor.
If a jail sentence is in the cards, it is likely that Trump and his attorneys would seek a stay on enforcement of that sentence pending appeal. If that were the scenario, would your office object to staying the sentence?
I'm going to let our words in court speak for themselves when we get to the sentencing matter. I'm not going to address hypotheticals. They raise arguments, we'll respond. And I think your question really underscores an important point. This is an active, ongoing matter, right? We have other phases of this going ahead. We will continue to do our speaking about this matter, about issues like that in court.
All right, last one.
From day one, kind of the viability of this case has been questioned in all sorts of media outlets, all over the place, including from the defendant himself. Can you respond to any of that, how you feel now that you've gotten the conviction?
So my response, again, is I did my job. And I think particularly I talked about the history of the office. My personal history, I started as a prosecutor in 2003 in the Public Integrity Unit in the New York State Attorney General's office. I served also in the Public Integrity Unit in the Southern District of New York. These are kind of cases I've done personally, and it's a hallmark of the tradition of this office that I'm proud to lead. And I don't want to go into the whole body of litigation, but we now have a federal court decision ruling on the legal theories. We had a state court decision on the omnibus motions. But most importantly, today we have the most important voice of all, and that's the voice of the jurors. They have spoken. Donald J. Trump has been convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records. Thank you.
District Attorney, your office has been investigating this case since
Are you concerned about retribution if Trump is elected president?
You went to the
So that is the Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg wrapping up his press conference after a very successful, of course, trial in which Mr. Trump was found guilty on all counts. Hallie Jackson, not only the anchor of this show, but the chief Washington correspondent for NBC. And I'll give you a lot of titles.
Thanks for sitting. Tom, we're glad to have you here. Thank you so much while I was racing back across the
Absolutely.
street.
Suzanne Craig is here also from the New York Times. And Suzanne, you've spent an awful lot of time in the courtroom. And I'm just wondering, being somebody who has watched this day in and day out, are you surprised? 34 counts, conviction all the way across?
My only surprise is I was in a betting pool, and I thought the verdict would come in tomorrow. But I thought it was, there was a lot of complicated pieces to the case and just pieces, really. But when it came down to it, the common sense didn't lead you to any other conclusion. And that was sort of my view all along. There was some debate about, there was two or three checks that weren't signed by him, so maybe they'll get not guilty on that. But if all the other ones were signed by him, and they all were for the same amount, it just looked like it would come down that way. But I have to say, there was a lot of mundane going through that case and covering it every day.
That the jurors had to sit through.
Right, but you were always aware of the moment and how monumentous it was. And today I really think now I'm just sitting really in that. It is just incredible that a former president has been found guilty on 34 counts of a
political
felony.
implication here.
Well, but it's not just a former president. It's the current presumptive Republican nominee, and his sentencing, I'm sure you've talked about it, is just 4 days before the Republican National Convention. I mean, talk about that collision course between the political and the legal here. And by the way, he may be announcing his vice presidential pick, his running mate, in that same week.
Well,
I mean, it's...
And I just want to say one thing, because we saw Donald Trump come out of the court, as he has done many times, and he gave his victim speech, and he pulled a lot of stuff that we heard in 2016 about blaming him for everything that he did.
In this moment, of course, outside Trump Tower.
Right. And the one thing that we didn't hear, it was a question that came after him, and he walked away and didn't answer it. And it was, why should Americans vote for a convicted felon? And that question will be following him around every day on the campaign trail going forward. And that is what separates this from all the other litigation that we have seen in the last 2 years. Yeah. This is a criminal felony, and it's him. It's not his companies. It is him.
But to Hallie now, okay, so we know that he gets a bump with the Republicans.
Exactly,
what happens to the independents?
But here's the thing. I got to be honest, and we love real talk here on the show. We don't know. And I think there needs to be some humility here from everybody, right? Political analysts, the pundits, the talking heads.
Polling does not have a good reputation.
They asked if he were to be, hypothetically, if he were to be convicted, what would you do? About 2/3 of people, you're seeing some of the numbers here, suggested 3/4, depending on the poll. It really doesn't make a difference. They would keep their vote the same. But anywhere from 11 to 23% of independents have suggested they would be less likely to vote for the former president if he were to be convicted. That's not a big number, but this election is not about big numbers. This election is about the margins. It is extraordinarily
close. Those votes go to Kennedy? Do they go to Biden? We don't know.
We don't know. And the other piece of this, it's different. Think about your own life. If you're asked about a hypothetical versus if you're asked about something that has actually happened. So I think we need a better sense of how the American public feels about this. Here's what we do know. A couple things. Number one, that the economy and immigration remain the biggest voting issues for Americans right now. Not legal issues, not anything else. It's those two things that consistently rate at the top of the polls for what people care about. Number two, we know that the Republicans are rallying around former President Trump. The Speaker of the House almost instantly was out with a statement calling this a shameful day in American history. And we have seen a list as long as my arm, an avalanche of responses from Republican lawmakers who are backing up the former president in this. So those are things we know for sure. We know that the Biden campaign is going to make this, as a senior campaign official told me before the verdict there on the Biden side, they want to remind people after what they described as natural amnesia over 4 years.
Commercials?
The drama.
Well, I was just thinking that earlier. I mean, how do you think the Biden campaign will weaponize
I think we've
this?
got a bit of a. I don't know that they necessarily will, only but to a huge degree. We're already seeing Democrats fundraising off of this. The Democratic campaign arm fundraising off of the verdict tonight. We got a taste of it with Robert De Niro and his appearance outside court earlier in the week, Tom.
Yeah, but it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? We're going to wrap up. This is your show. Say goodbye.
Oh, Tom Cassell, thank you so much for being here for us. Suzanne Craig, thank you to all of us here at NBC News Now. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.